How's it going guys, Chris here. You've probably heard all the Battlefield news from the other day by now, and you probably know that Season 1 for Battlefield 2042 is being postponed till the summer. If you haven't, well, now you know. An update on social media pretty much verified this, and they mentioned a few things about addressing feedback, intensive fixes, adding some of the key features, improving core elements, blah blah blah. Nothing particularly too specific, but still a sign that they could potentially rework some of the game and change things over the course of the next few months, at the expense of postponing the first season. No doubt a lot of you guys are going to be pissed off with Season 1 being pushed back, especially with it already being pretty far down the line without any sort of substantial content making its way into the game, which already feels really light on content as it is. But let's be totally honest here, the game doesn't just need more content right now, it needs to be fixed from the core first, because that new content wouldn't mean jack shit if the game itself was still suffering from a wild identity crisis while still being hampered by poor design choices. Imagine if Season 1 was to launch next month. How many people would actually be really bothered about coming back and investing a lot of their time into it? Especially seems a lot of people have uninstalled the game at this point and have no desire to return to it until it fundamentally changes and improves. The biggest problem at this point is that it doesn't really look or feel like a Battlefield game. It's lost its identity and it's lost community interest. Throwing seasonal content into this game right now would probably end up being another bad decision. It'd be a bit like going out for a meal and ordering steak, but you get fish instead. And then to solve the problem, they give you more fish. More of something you didn't really want in the first place. DICE were in no position to launch Season 1 next month for Battlefield 2042. It wouldn't have brought many players back, and the ones that did probably wouldn't have hung around for very long. In its current form, the game's lost and disconnected with its community, and simply adding more content wouldn't be enough for it to return to an acceptable state. As annoying as it might seem, pushing back Season 1 is probably a good call and probably the right call. It's a necessary step towards this game regaining any of its identity. It's a move that, if DICE worked with the community rather than against it, could put the game in a better light by the time Season 1 eventually hits. And it's also probably the biggest indication so far that the game is getting a much needed rework, with the possibility that community feedback might even start to be taken more seriously going forwards. You never know. I'm not saying they're going to make it the Battlefield game that we all wanted it to be. I really doubt they're going to completely flip this game around and turn it into a Battlefield 4 sequel or anything, as there's a lot of stuff built into the game like the specialists, which literally can't be removed at this point for legal reasons. But it could potentially be an opportunity for the devs to implement all the traditional features missing at launch, change the game to make it suit the Battlefield fanbase better, and essentially try and fix a lot of its design issues and identity problems, perhaps making it a better game that might actually be worth coming back to in the end. With that said, at this point, it's all just a big what if scenario, because there's a hell of a lot of bloody stuff that needs changing and we don't even know if the right things will eventually be changed, or even if summertime is long enough for the devs to get the game back on the right track. Quite recently, a lot of people have been saying how this needs to be another miracle story like No Man's Sky, which, if you don't remember, was a game back in 2016 that winded up being in a fairly similar position at launch, full of false promises and big expectations that failed in a huge way when it hit the shelves, notorious for its negative perception and completely butchered by the gaming community as a result. The game was made by a pretty small team, but no matter how much flack they received, they stood by their product, listened to the feedback, and updated it as time went by. No Man's Sky has almost completely been revived and is now considered one of the gaming world's biggest comebacks, still being updated and improved to this day, now having its own following with its negative image pretty much washed away. If this kind of thing was to happen with Battlefield 2042, it'd take a fair bit of time to pull off, but of course, there's a lot more hands working on Battlefield than there was on No Man's Sky. The window between now and summer when Season 1 launches should be used to put the game back on the right course, and I've got a feeling that Season 1 will essentially be planned as a relaunch of sorts. An opportunity to try and bury the past and change some of the community's perception of the game, acting more like a revival as opposed to just being a time to throw some content at the people still playing it. At the end of the day, it's in EA's best interest to get fans back on board with Battlefield 2042 by doing what needs to be done and fixing what needs to be fixed. Because if they were to launch Season 1 while its reputation was still in tatters, then they wouldn't sell as many season passes and cosmetics, deeming the game's live service model a failure going forwards. Along with the announcement on social media, it was also stated that players were going to receive some in-game customization options if they owned either the Gold or Ultimate editions of Battlefield 2042. Now this is hardly anything to get excited about, and definitely not reasonable enough to act as compensation for owners of those editions, many of who will probably be wanting a refund instead. The McKay skin that's been offered does look a little bit similar to one or two of the AI skins in the game, which is what people have been asking to see more of since the start. regarding cosmetics that actually fit the game's tone and lore. Could this possibly indicate a shift in style for the cosmetics in the future, going for more badass military gear rather than colourful clown suits? I'm not counting on it, but hopefully it does, as at least this stuff actually fits the game's near future setting, plus it also helps to cover up McKay's dopey face. On the Battlefield briefing page, it's said that DICE currently have a team analysing the specialists and working on them, whatever the hell that means. Could this be a change of their character, perhaps giving them more serious voice lines while yeeting the crappy end of round quips into oblivion? One can only hope. But once again, don't count on it just yet, as nothing along those lines have been announced. They've also said that a key focus area will be adding more cover to the maps and improving their flow. So at least that's another thing that might eventually make the game a bit more fun to play, being one of the many big criticisms surrounding the game since it first came out. But right now, at this very moment in time, it's a fucking awful time to be a Battlefield fan, as all of this stuff should have been sorted before the game launched, not 7 or so months after. And we still don't even really know whether it'll be in a good position by the time Season 1 eventually reaches us in the summer, because not all of the community's feedback has been addressed yet, including some of the bigger subjects like class structure. So what does this all mean for my channel and content on it going forwards? Well, I've been pretty vocal about Battlefield 2042 since its release, and a lot of you can probably guess that I don't really want to keep making content for it right now. And I definitely don't want to kick off a new gun guide series while the game is going through such a crisis, even though I do miss making those videos. I'm not a news channel, because I find making news content a bit boring, and there's already about 1,000 channels that cover Battlefield news topics as it is. So although there's probably going to be lots of updates on the game's progression over the next few months, I really can't be arsed making those kind of videos that everybody else will be doing. Probably a lot quicker than me too. I'm probably going to be putting Battlefield on the shelf for a while and focusing on other games, while Battlefield 2042 cooks a little bit longer in the oven. Views are probably going to suffer for a bit, but I'd rather make content on games that I like instead of a game that I don't. And with stuff like Dying Light 2 and Horizon Forbidden West coming up in the near future, I might be tempted to do some guides and maybe some commentaries and stuff on those games, along with other random things too. I'll probably come back to Battlefield every now and then, but I'm not going to commit to making Battlefield content almost exclusively like I have done the past few years, especially while Battlefield isn't Battlefield anymore. If it returns to form, then there's no doubt that I'll be back with tons of content for it, but at this point in time, we can only really hope that it ever does. I've not entirely lost hope in the series, but I am very skeptical at this point that it'll ever really regain its true identity. But I guess we shouldn't be sad, because this is just how it works out sometimes. Thanks for watching guys, take it easy, stay tuned to see some different sort of stuff on the channel in the near future, and I'll be seeing you in that next one.